Anyway, people using mental health services have more than twice the mortality rate to the general population. And people with experiences labelled as psychotic have more than 3 times the overall risk of premature death. Now, if that sounds a bit complicated, what it means is that some with serious mental health problems live 25 years less than the general population. And I'd suggest to you that if that was happening with housewives or All Blacks or rugby league stars, that there'd be an absolute outcry. But unfortunately, in mental health, that outcry, well, it has gathered momentum because of the Equally Well initiative. So we've got Equally Well strategic lead Helen Lockett on the line. Helen helps build the profile of Equally Well with stakeholders and find opportunities to expand and strengthen activities in the mental health sector. And in the studio, I should say that Helen, I believe, is in Christchurch, in a flash hotel down there, I believe. And we've also got Carolyn Swanson, the service user lead for TPO, and Caro provides a service user perspective and advises on strategic issues and direction with Equally Well. So welcome to both of you. Helen, you've talked about Equally Well on Take It From Us before. You're still there?
Kia Sheldon, it's brilliant to come back and speak to you. And I'm in my car on the way to the airport, although I'm not driving. And I'm probably not looking as flash as Caro sounds like she is. So I'm sorry not to be with you in person.
She's looking magnificent after a little, more than little piece of surgery. I think she's given up all the sex, drugs and rock and roll and is looking absolutely wonderful.
Not all of those
Not
things.
all of those things.
Just some.
Well, anyway, we better start talking seriously because whenever Carolyn's around, it's very difficult to be serious. But firstly, to do with Equally Well, Helen, what are the drivers of poor physical health among people with lived experience?
Well, as people might recall from the 2014 evidence review, what we tried to do is split it into a number of areas, because if you're going to try and affect change, you need to help people think about where they fit in it and what they can do something about. So we have focused on 6 main areas. Firstly is the things that the workforce issues, so things around the way in which we train and support our workforce. We do that separately, so you kind of get on a mental health training trajectory or an addiction trajectory or a physical health general medicine trajectory rather than thinking about people as a whole person. And there's all the stuff around diagnostic overshadowing. The second area is around the way we've separated our systems at a funding and also geographical level, because mental health and addiction services are so often in a different physical location from general health services. Then there's the effects of psychotropic medications and also methadone in terms of the cardiometabolic effects. Fourthly, there's the fact that many people, not everyone, but many people are living in lower levels of income, having no job, in poverty, poor housing, which again we know all those social determinants of health affect your physical health and your mental health. Fifthly, we're looking at adverse childhood experiences, so the effects of that on your physical and mental health, and particularly the need to deliver trauma-informed care. And I guess then lastly is that whole idea about the kind of lifestyle, but Caro will tell you that we chose not to call it lifestyle choice factors, but we talked a lot about that, about reducing exposure to known risk factors. So, exercise, alcohol consumption, those nutrition, those sorts of things. But I want to point out that there are 6 things, and when you're looking at addressing health inequities, which is what this is, it's very easy just to focus on all the things that individuals can do and start a bit more of a blaming culture. And we've been really clear not to do that within the collaborative, to say there's many things that are affecting this issue and you can do something in your sphere of influence.
I mean, some of those things have really deteriorated, haven't they, for people with lived experience? Housing has become less accessible. It's become more expensive. Rents are going up dramatically. They've just had a survey in Auckland to try and get a handle on how many homeless people are living in the city, and I actually volunteered to do that, but eventually missed out some way. So it's not getting easier for people with lived experience, and I've got Caro in the studio here agreeing, shaking her head and agreeing with that. What's your feeling, Carolyn?
Well, I think it's like Helen says, it is a really complicated kind of thing to look at and how to figure out how best to address it. But life is hard for people. There is huge pressure on services currently, on mental health and addiction services. Things are tougher, but I think the way that I've kind of worked with Helen around some of the Equally Well things is to think about, it is easy to blame the person, but in actual fact, life's hard enough when you're facing lived experience stuff without piling on a whole pile more things like housing, getting to doctors, getting to, the chemist, getting to all the different things, exercising, eating right. It's a really complicated issue that has to be looked at from several different angles.
So do you think it becomes overwhelming for people? And
absolutely.
And they just become stymied and, they don't do anything at all?
Well, I think...
and I think it's really easy as well to think, I won't talk to this person around reducing tobacco intake, or I won't talk about these other things because they've got so much going on. But actually, there doesn't mean that the person can't look at a number of things, or just be encouraged to think that you believe in the person. So if we think about when someone goes to visit the GP, there are ways in which you can talk about smoking cessation or supporting withdraw from medication at the same time things are going on, if you're doing that in a supportive way. But it's still someone's choice. But I think sometimes we steer away from it because we think, oh gosh, there's too many things, so we just won't talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, we're pretty good in New Zealand at not talking about these critical issues, Helen, I'd have to say, particularly in mental health, suicide rates, domestic violence. Isn't that the reason why we've got the prevalence of these issues in New Zealand?
So I think what we've been able to do with the collaborative is get people talking, really talk about the key issues that people are facing, help people walk in the shoes of people with lived experience, help pharmacists, GPs, psychiatrists think about their role and how people might be nervous about going in to see the GP. People know that the meds have affected their weight. There's a sense of embarrassment around those things, and not just assuming people are non-compliant or not interested. And I think we're doing a huge amount in the collaborative to really bust all those myths. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of champions across the country who were doing this work before Equally Well came along. But what we've done is, I think, is given them a bit of a megaphone and an encouragement, and brought a collective group of champions together. And then we found people from all over the health and health-related sectors who are committed to doing things about this and are demonstrating good practice in their field.
How many organisations have actually signed up to Equally Well?
So on last count, there's probably about 130. We don't, we're a very small little backbone team supported by Te Paua Te Whakaranui. We just chip away, and so we get endorsements every week. So we're just over 120. In the UK, I think they've already reached more than 50 in a month, so I'm sure that soon that they'll be surpassing us. But the point is that people endorse and then they commit to action. So we want endorsements that are action-focused. So we don't work hard at getting endorsements. People often go, I didn't know about that. Oh, I'll endorse. And organisations sign up really quickly.
Yeah.
New Zealand... Yeah, go on, Sarah.
Sorry, Helen. I was just going to say one of the really huge things that I think makes an enormous difference with the Equally Well collaborative is the lived experience voice and the how prevalent that is and how to the front of everything and involved in everything.
Well, this is Mental Health Radio, take it from us, and I'm Sheldon Brown with Declan Curran, and we're talking today about the Equally Well campaign. We have Helen Lockett on the phone from Christchurch and Carolyn Swanson here in the studio. So let's just talk a little bit about how Equally Well is promoting those changes in behaviour which are necessary for people to have a better quality of life.
I'll start with something and then Helen will probably jump in. I guess we have to think about what Equally Well is, and it's a group of organisations and people. So there isn't one thing that we kind of promote or do as Equally Well. However, within Equally Well, there's a lot of things that are happening to encourage changes for people that are positive for them, and they're really varied. And I think, as always with things like this, it so much depends on the person, where they're at, what they have available to them, and what they are able to do at that time. I know myself, when I'm in the worst places of overwhelm and feeling really bad, that the last thing I'm going to do is go for a run, quite frankly. You're lucky to get me off the floor. But at other times, things like that can be helpful. It's the same as trying to figure stuff out about how you might live differently. You can't really do that so much in a place of crisis. So a lot of stuff's around timing, a lot of stuff's around being more holistic, because the mental health components and the physical health components are separated by services and by processes, as Helen talked about, and that actually has a really dire effect on people. I mean, I have 3 examples from my own life of physical health problems being diagnosed as mental health problems. And even with this last heart attack and quadruple bypass surgery, that I was under mental health services for a year before that happened. And I know from how much better I feel now that most of that was in fact a physical health problem. I had heart disease, and yet everyone, including me, who's a champion for Equally Well and who has access to all the latest research and stuff, completely missed there was anything physically wrong. And so I think a lot of the things we do aren't about necessarily behaviours, but it's about informing. It's about letting people know what things could be. It's about remembering that everyone needs the same tests, and because this is a global problem. It's not just a Kiwi problem.
Caro might call it a heart health conversation. So,
yes.
You don't have to call it a cardiovascular disease risk assessment. You can have a conversation about looking after your heart and what that might do, because it's hard at 25 to think about being 40 and 45. But, we can. I've just been talking at the Harm Reduction Conference that's all about reducing that later harm. But I think, as Caro says, we've actually got a load of information out there and increased awareness. And one of the things that Caro said to me very early on is, if we could get rid of the culture that you just put on weight in an inpatient unit or when you're prescribed medications, if we could get rid of that culture that just happens and it's inevitable, then that would be a major change. And I do see anecdotally people questioning that in a way that I didn't 5 years ago. I don't know how you feel about that, Caro.
No, I absolutely agree. I think, there was an acceptance that, if people had serious problems, that they would have to take the medication that they take, and part of that was putting on weight and all these other things, and nobody talked about it, especially not with the person. But now I do see people having those conversations, but also being more conservative in how they might approach a medical response, a pharmaceutical response to things. So, and much more information for the person as well, which is really important.
But it isn't the reality that if we have to take some of these heavy-duty medications for psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, that we're going to put on weight, even with antidepressants. So, I mean, firstly, I don't think there are too many prescribers who are issuing a warning about this.
Yep.
The other thing is the incredibly damaging impact that has on people's status, their view of themselves, and this is only one side effect, the putting of weight on. I mean, there are so many other side effects.
Well, one of the things we're looking at is going back to basics on prescribing and saying lowest dose for the shortest amount of time possible and keep reviewing it.
And full information.
And information at the same time. And in fact, I call them the known physical health impacts of many of the prescribed medications in the context of psychotropic medications. So it's actually thinking that through, giving information at time of prescribing, but also thinking about the alternatives prior to prescribing. So in partnership with the College of GPs, we've just developed a prescribing for wellbeing toolkit. I'm trying to look at a number of scenarios, again, getting GPs to think twice before writing a script. And that's not a new thing, because there's a whole group of primary care professionals who are calling for that in relation to treating depression and anxiety and bipolar and schizophrenia, but they can now get amplified by the Equally Well message. So we've actually found a whole range of champions that were already talking about that, but hadn't thought about it in the context of the physical health, mental health.
Well, you know, that's absolutely wonderful, but I've been pushing on, take it from us, over the last 2 weeks, this scandal, I would call it, with Enlofax and other generic antidepressants. And the answer from prescribers is that if you are having side effects, you should, and your depression and anxiety are worsening, then you've got to increase the dosage. Now, I can't believe that prescribers are recommending that they expand or extend the dosage when my understanding would be that the side effects are going to intensify with an increase in the dosage. And surely the responsibility of prescribers should be, as you say, Helen, to prescribe as little as possible to address the mental health issue.
And I think if I think about the sort of 6 main action pushes for mental health and addiction providers, prescribing for wellbeing, compliance with current clinical guidelines. So if we look at the BPAC, if we look at the College of Psychiatry guidelines, they'll all say exactly what you said, Sheldon. Yeah. So it's about making sure we comply with what people are trained in initially, which is lowest dose for the shortest amount as possible, keep reviewing, and also looking at other first lines of treatment. And if you look at any of the clinical guidelines that we have in this country, they're very clear about mitigating and managing the effects on people's physical health as well as their mental health. So, you know, it's about adhering to those.